Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, I don't have any visual material to show, but my name is Mike Goddard. I chair the Public Safety Spectrum Policy Group. I act as an independent chairman of that interdepartmental group, which brings together government and Ofcom. Membership includes Home Office, Department of Justice, Department of Health, Ministry of Defence, DCLG, etc., Cabinet Office, and so on, the Scottish Government and the Police Services of Northern Ireland. What the function of that group is to do is to give advice to the government and to Ofcom on spectrum for the emergency services. So our day-to-day job is to look at all the very large range of frequency bands that the emergency services use, from low VHF right up to the very high ranges of the microwave spectrum, and deal with any particular new requirements, new requests that come into those areas. As far as the ESMCP is concerned, we're taking somewhat of a watching brief. The programme, obviously led by the Home Office, will take whatever decisions it needs to take. Our concern is primarily making sure that spectrum is available for whatever route the emergency services go down. I think there's quite a lot of confusion about the frequency bands, and there's a lot of confusing the availability of spectrum with the decisions on the airwave contract, on licensing, etc. So let me just cover the two areas of, I think, of most interest, and then I'm very happy to take any questions as part of the wider debate. The first one is the spectrum that is used at the moment by airwave. That's the spectrum around 400 megahertz, which we extracted painfully from NATO, from defence use many, many years ago, and has served us extremely well since. Now, at government level, that spectrum remains available for the emergency services in the UK as long as it is needed, and if necessary, way beyond 2020. We expect it to be used, for example, in Northern Ireland in that time period. So in terms of the basic spectrum resource, not the contracts, not the licensing, that spectrum is available for emergency services and cannot be used for anything else, such as commercial use, because I think it's fairly clear the Ministry of Defence still has a handle on that spectrum. If the emergency services stop using it, it'll go back into the Ministry of Defence pot, and it is a NATO-wide coordinated band, so it would revert to military use, I think, if that happened. The second issue is the 700 megahertz band, which BAPCO certainly has focused on, as we've heard. Again, just to explain the position nationally and internationally, the so-called 700 megahertz band was allocated at the last World Radio Conference in 2012 to the mobile service. Unusually, that allocation was made on a provisional basis, and the next conference at the end of next year will probably confirm that allocation. But having what's called an allocation of the mobile service doesn't make it available. It's still also allocated to the broadcasting service. So the critical issue is not what the conference does next year, but what national administrations, the Ofcom, perhaps with government influence, what it decides to do with regard to removing broadcasting so as to clear the spectrum for mobile. And the writing is on the wall that that's likely to happen, but I must make it very clear that neither Ofcom nor the UK government has yet taken that decision. If that decision is taken, it will require quite a major upheaval to broadcasting services, replanning them, as was done before, to make room for the so-called 800 megahertz band that's now been auctioned. And so the timescale for making that spectrum available is actually quite lengthy. Even if a decision was taken in 2015, 2016, in the best will in the world, that spectrum would be unlikely to be available much before the end of the decade, and I've heard reference to 2022 as a timescale. So it's not an immediate solution, and in terms of airwave and contracts and ESMCP, the timing doesn't fit too well, unfortunately. But that is the situation. The 400 megahertz band remains available in the indefinite future if it's needed. The 700 megahertz band is likely to be, not yet confirmed, available for mobile services, and the timescale, as I say, is quite lengthy, end of decade at best. So perhaps I'll finish there. Very happy to take any questions. I'll revert to my seat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike.